You're listening to Short History Shorts audio, where history speaks louder than images. Long before the clash at Cannae or the burning of Carthage, two rising powers in the ancient Mediterranean sat down to negotiate terms, not with swords drawn, but with parchment and oaths. The year was 509 BC, according to Roman tradition, and the city of Rome had just overthrown its monarchy, forming a new republic. Meanwhile, Carthage, the powerful Phoenician-descended trading empire on the North African coast, was already a major naval power, with influence stretching from Iberia to the western Mediterranean islands. It is in this context that the Treaty of 509 BC was forged, a document preserved not in Carthaginian archives, which were lost to time and Roman fire, but in Roman records, specifically in the pages of the Roman historian Polybius, writing some 3 centuries later. Despite this temporal distance, the treaty remains the earliest known written agreement between Rome and a foreign power, and it reveals more than just diplomatic language. It opens a window into the geopolitical landscape of the early Mediterranean and gives us the first glimpse of the dynamics between two cities destined to become mortal enemies. The treaty's text, quoted in Greek by Polybius in his histories, outlines a clear agreement between Rome and Carthage. It appears to grant the Romans trading rights in Carthage itself, as well as in parts of Libya and Sardinia, but under strict conditions. Roman merchants were not to set up permanent posts, and if they did any trading, it had to be in the presence of a Carthaginian official, likely to ensure taxation and prevent espionage. In return, the Carthaginians agreed not to harm Latin communities under Roman protection, but they reserved the right to deal with any community that was not already allied with Rome. The treaty also recognized Roman dominance over Latium and Carthaginian supremacy in Sicily, Sardinia, and Africa. The mutual recognition of spheres of influence was unusual for the time. It's a concept we associate more with Cold War diplomacy than with the archaic Mediterranean world, but it reveals that both Rome and Carthage were already thinking beyond their own borders, staking claims over neighbors and rivals. In essence, this was a non-aggression pact combined with a commercial treaty, and it reflected a mutual desire to avoid conflict while profiting from peaceful interaction. But the treaty also raises serious questions. Was Rome truly a major player in 509 BC? After all, this was the same year that Lucius Junius Brutus led the Roman nobles in ousting the last king, Tarquin the Proud. The Republic was brand new, its institutions untested, and its control over Latium was still being contested. Why would Carthage, a city that had already fought Greeks in Sicily and fielded navies to Spain, bother treating with Rome as an equal? The answer may lie in geography and trade. Rome, even in its infancy, sat on the Tiber River close to the Tyrrhenian Sea and controlled a key inland route between Etruria and Campania. Carthage may have seen Rome as a useful partner, or at least a power worth neutralizing, before it grew too strong. There's also a theory that Rome's new government needed external validation. Securing a treaty with Carthage might have lent the Republic a veneer of legitimacy, helping it shore up support at home and among its Latin neighbors. Some scholars even speculate that the treaty might have originated a few years later than 509 BC, but was backdated in Roman records to match the symbolic year of the monarchy's fall. Whether or not that's true, the treaty remains evidence that Rome was already thinking diplomatically and commercially at a time when its military reputation was still under development. The terms of the treaty also reveal how Carthage operated. The careful restrictions on Roman traders and the insistence on oversight show a sophisticated bureaucracy, one that cared about regulating foreign merchants and maintaining dominance over its commercial zones. Carthage's economic empire was built on trade routes, colonies, and naval supremacy. Letting an ambitious power like Rome move freely could threaten that balance. So the treaty functioned as a containment strategy, cordoning off Roman influence while still reaping the benefits of trade. On the other side, Rome likely saw the treaty as a door opener. By agreeing to Carthaginian conditions, they gained access to goods and markets far beyond Latium, perhaps even to Carthaginian silver, grain, and manufactured goods like cloth, pottery, and weapons. For a city transitioning out of monarchy, these trade opportunities may have been vital to stabilizing the economy and fueling the Republic's growth. This treaty, then, wasn't just a sign of peace. It was a calculated move by both sides to manage risk and increase prosperity, all while keeping a wary eye on the future. Over the next century, additional treaties followed, with variations on terms and tone. One treaty, believed to date to around 348 BC, shows that Carthage agreed not to attack certain Latin allies of Rome, and even included restrictions on Carthaginian commanders entering Roman territory with warships. This progression suggests growing Roman strength and influence. By the 3rd century BC, however, the tone had shifted. Rome's expansion into southern Italy and interest in Sicily brought it into direct conflict with Carthaginian claims. The Treaty of 509 had been a diplomatic gesture. By 264 BC, diplomacy gave way to war, and the First Punic War began. In this sense, the original treaty stands as a historical prequel to one of antiquity's greatest rivalries. It reminds us that Rome and Carthage did not begin as natural enemies. They were both city-states with commercial ambitions, bound by geography to recognize each other and try, at least for a time, to coexist. In the end, what makes the Treaty of 509 BC so fascinating is not just its content, but its context. It shows us a Rome that was ambitious but still modest, and a Carthage that was powerful but cautious. It reveals how ancient diplomacy operated, not through grand summits or public speeches, but through practical agreements, mutual interests, and cautious trust. It tells us that history is not always about conquest and bloodshed. Sometimes it begins with ink and parchment, in quiet acts of recognition that prefigure future storms. And while the peace would not last, the treaty endures, as the earliest documented sign that two titans of history were aware of each other, watching, measuring, and waiting. From this seed of peace would grow a century-long rivalry that would shake the ancient world to its foundation.